Introduce yourselves, okay?
So introduce myself on the microphone. So I'm Cristina Oliveira. So I'm going to do this joint presentation with Rosane Minguim, who is my colleague from São Carlos. And we'll try to give you a panorama of recent research from our group in São Carlos. So we are used to do joint presentations. We have this spatial configuration back home. We have front office. Our offices are just door to door. So we intrude a lot on each other's business, and therefore we work together. So that. The focus of our research is on multidimensional data visualization using point placement and dimension reduction techniques. Before I go into the research specifically, I will just, for the sake of the few of you who don't know where we are, so I'll talk a bit about ICMC, or ICMC, which is the Instituto de Ciências Matemáticas e de Computação. So it's a computer science and mathematics institute. It's from University of São Paulo. We are located in São Carlos, which is around 200 kilometers from São Paulo, roughly. So it's a relatively big institute for Brazilian standards. So we offer several undergraduate courses, mainly on computing and maths and statistics. So there are 8 undergraduate courses, 8 or 9. And we also have then 2 graduate programs, one of them in computer science. So that's the graduate program in which we work. So just a few data for you to have an idea. And this is the visualization, imaging, and computer graphics group. So we have some people who do work mainly on visualization, some people on imaging, some people on graphics, some people on more than one of those topics. And although I've segregated us in this particular image, we are not segregated with a lot of work together, actually. So there's a lot of interaction in our work. So I think all of us are here, except Moacir Ponte. There are students from Moacir here, but he didn't manage to come. And these are most of our students. There are some recent ones which I didn't have the time actually to add the pictures. So we have several doctorate and master students. Some of them are here too. And I didn't have the pictures of the, we have also some undergraduate students who do this research on, which in Brazilian is called, on this program, which we call scientific initiation. So there are undergraduate students working on research projects. So there are several of them as well. And this is where we are as far as the internet is concerned. So if you want to have an idea of projects and some tools and some resources, you can find them on our web page, which is never updated, I'm afraid. But you have an idea there. So then our research, so I'm talking mainly about visualization research, and this is mainly on visual data mining, visual analytics, and visualization of multidimensional data. So, well, I don't have to go much further into the motivation for this audience. So essentially, what we're trying to do is to help people to make sense of their data. And we do that mainly with techniques that we call generally as point placement, which try to generate two-dimensional or maybe three-dimensional layouts of data that tries to somehow help the user to see structure. So can I identify what is correlated or related or similar, or can I see some sort of hierarchical structure? So basically, the input for these techniques can be either a matrix of pairwise distances, so you have some sort of assessment of similarity between pairs of data instances, or you may have a dimensional embedding of your data. So you have feature vectors that describe the data. And basically, we work on these two classes of techniques, which we call projection-based, which are mainly variations of what is known as multidimensional scaling techniques, or other dimension reduction approaches, some of them very well known. And so essentially what these techniques try to do is to generate a mapping of the data, which is defined in a very high dimensional space, into a low dimensional space from which you can generate a visual embedding, a visual representation. And some techniques are these tree-based techniques. So researchers from our group introduced the use of a particular kind of tree for visualizing data. And I'm coming back to this soon. So basically, you might say, well, but then what's new on that? Because this idea of actually creating low-dimensional representations to represent high-dimensional data, this is not new, and several classical techniques actually do that. Some of them, most people know, like, for example, principal components analysis, which is a four-dimensional reduction, and several others. But then the point is, although there are several techniques which are not new, there are many issues that remain, particularly because many of those techniques have been proposed in a time when the situation as far as data is concerned was very different. So nowadays, we have lots and lots of data of very different natures, and we also have many possibilities as far as, for example, interaction and using the user knowledge to generate the knowledge, the visualizations is concerned. So the fact that you have the techniques does not mean that they are suitable to your data and your tasks in all kinds of situations. And so there is a lot of motivation for actually investigating further techniques such as these. So I can mention, for example, that you want the techniques to be interactive. So some of these classic techniques, they are very computationally expensive, and therefore you cannot generate interactive representations of millions or billions of data sets. And also, nowadays, the user can interact with a representation, and then sometimes the user does not, there's a lot of, she wants to learn about the data, but there is something about the domain of the data that the user knows, and that can actually be used in favor of generating better representations, or of improving the representations so that they are effective to support user tasks. So, for example, one of the, actually the motivation for this work started from Fernando Pavlovic's PhD work, and he was trying to generate interactive visual representations of text collections, and he found out that the classical dimensional reduction or projection techniques wouldn't actually help a lot in his problem. So that was the motivation, for example, for introducing the least square projection, which was published in 2008. And so the goal was to be able to create interactive representations from text collections. It has been shown to be effective for this task. And it's a technique that differs from previous ones, for example, because it's concerned with preserving neighborhoods rather than actually trying to preserve distances globally. And it does so by identifying a subset of samples of control points that actually guide the mapping of the icons that represent the text, the documents in the screen. And it takes as input either a distance matrix of the similarities or a vector space representation of the papers in the collection. And so this was the first motivation, and LSP has been applied in the visualization of several text collections. and actually introduced the group into the many issues related to using projection-based techniques. And so after LSP, several other projection techniques, new projection techniques have been introduced, trying to handle specific limitations or specific situations. So for example, PLMP was introduced later in 2010, and the motivation here was scalability. So they were looking for a technique that would be able to handle in the orders of millions of data items. So LSP, for example, can handle well a few thousand data items or tens of thousands of data items. But what if you have like millions of them? So that was the motivation for the PLMP. And because it's very effective in handling millions of data items, it can be applied, for example, to visualize time-varying and streaming data. So in apart from the scalability, for being scalable, it has also the characteristic that it generates the mapping based on a subsample, on a small set of distance information. So, and then it reuses this information to project the remaining instances that come later. So therefore, it can actually handle a stream of data as it comes, rather than actually deriving the mapping, needing to know all the data in order to derive the mapping. Then there are also other issues, for example, the ability of providing local control or ensuring local control of the projection. So you have a visual mapping, but the user, for example, knows that this mapping is not doing a good job of conveying the information on the data locally for certain regions. So that was the motivation for the piecewise Laplacian-based projection. And so it differs from previous ones in the sense that it provides local control and flexibility in handling user interactions. So if the user knows that something is not good, she can interact with the projection and modify the mapping, and this information is used to map other instances, for example. This is also true of LAMP, which has uses another approach to handle the mapping problem. So it's based on orthogonal mapping theory. And it has the feature of providing both global and local control. And in this example here, they actually generated a visualization of music data with video data. And the user, actually the visualization can correlate data from different natures. So you can correlate based on similarity the video and the music and generate a visualization based on that. So this is has as features, interesting features, being the low cost, computational cost, and the mapping is very precise. So the previous examples are all from projection techniques. So the other the other class of techniques I mentioned were those three based. So that was a work from Roseanne and collaborators and several students from her. And they introduced the use of phylogenetic trees that are usually employed in biology to visualize multidimensional data. So they proposed this use of these trees, so they generated a modified algorithm and investigated its application mainly on text collections. And then there is more recent work in which they improved the algorithms, because the trees are very nice as compared to the projections in the sense that they offer a different kind of information about the data, because there is the hierarchy. So you are seeing a hierarchy of similarity relationships. And you may generate a representation that is effective to convey the hierarchy, like the second one here, but then it's difficult to interact, and you want to be able to have other layouts that favor interaction. So this new algorithm, and the more recent one, it improves the previous one in this, by being quicker and more effective in the use of the visual space. So you have actually, you are able to present more information in a single representation. So we believe that projections and trees are very effective as tools for handling high-dimensional data, because they provide a sort of a generic framework that applies to several different types of data. And they complement each other in the sense that the projections provide a view of the global relationships in our data set, usually, and the trees allow you to see at the global and local relationships at the same time. So usually these are representations that complement each other and might be used together or in combination. So we've been, as we've seen, so several new techniques have been proposed, and we have also been working on applying these techniques in different kinds of problems and domains. So text is a domain that is much of interest to us. That was the initial motivation for part of this work. But we've also been using these techniques to visualize and interact with image collections, with data generated by sensor measurements, to interact with volumetric data, usually multivalued volumes, time-varying volumes, and social networks, particle trajectories, and several others. So I'll just provide a glimpse of some of them very quickly. So this is an example, and I think Rosanne is going to present another example of this later. So this is a co-authorship network that's been generated from data from Eurovis, papers published in Eurovis from 2000 to 2007. So these layouts here, they have circles and squares. The circles represent the authors, and the squares represent the papers. So in these layouts, usually the authors are close to their papers, and the edges indicate that there is an author is connected to a paper she authored, and authors are connected between themselves if they co-authored papers together, and papers are connected if they have common authors. So users may interact with this representation, with this authorship graph, to find information about the collection. Like, for example, here so it's the same view, the same network, and on the right here, they've colored the papers that have included the keyword tree. So green and red means that there is the keyword tree in the abstract. So usually these representations are not generated from the whole paper, but the abstract titles, authors, of course, and sometimes the references as well, in this case. On the left there, they've colored the authors based on between it. So being a graph, a network, you can apply or you can use lots of this statistical information that you derive from this kind of networks, like centrality measures such as betweenness, and to investigate what's happening in the collection. So the one particular, another particular application which we are very proud of is that with people who work on material science, on nanomaterials actually. So and we were very proud of it because these are is a real problem. So these people had a real data analysis problem, and when we started collaborating and using our techniques, we actually helped them to solve or advance in solving some of the problems they have. So just to illustrate, so there are several variations of this application, but in this example here, the problem they had was actually to detect from the presence of glucose and triglycerides in blood samples. So what they have is they have these nanometric devices which are sensors of arrays, and from these sensors of arrays they generate, they take electrochemical measurements, which is usually a spectrum of measurements. So you have lots and lots and lots of samples, and you want to be able to say if this sample has the presence of certain particular substance. So you may be interested, for example, in differentiating detecting the presence of particular substance, differentiating between substances, things like that. So in this example, they wanted to differentiate samples that had glucose from samples which had triglycerides, and also they wanted to be able to know whether their sensors would be able to detect the presence of either of these substances, and to which precision, right? So what we have here is samples with different, with or without the presence of either glucose or triglycerides, and when they had the substance, it might appear at very different concentrations. It might be very tiny concentrations or higher concentrations. So this visualization there is actually telling them that the sensor configuration they have can distinguish triglyceride samples from glucose samples, because they are very far apart in the representation. And more than that, it can actually distinguish between different concentrations of this substance. Why this is important for them? Because actually, when they are investigating, they have a huge variety of sensor configurations which they can use, and they can combine the results from different configurations. So it's very hard to find out from the measurements which are the best configurations for the particular problem at hand. So in the bottom there, what we have is a complementary information to the one in the top, which is actually trying to show them why is it that some configurations are better than others. So we know that the sensors are differentiating between the substances, but which measurements from the whole spectrum are actually the ones that are doing the job of differentiating them. So, in fact, there is a considerable demand for people in applications having problems with data and trying to use visualization to help them. So this is another application that we are just starting to work with. So this is the doctoral project of Vinicius, who is actually there. And the problem they have, this is people from the biology department at the Federal University, is that they have these many images of algae, and they grow these colonies of algae, and they want to classify, to do taxonomical classification. And as it is now, they do it all manually. So they extract features from the images manually. They take measurements with a rule, and they use this and information they know from the books combined to do the classification. And so this is a very error-prone process, and they are not happy with the results. And we are trying to see if we can help them to do better, to handle better with these problems. So this is just to give you a glimpse of what we've been doing. There are several open problems to handle related to different issues, and I'll just talk briefly about some of them and before I hand over to Roseanne. So one of the problems we have, and we think that's preventing these techniques to being more used, is the one of actually finding proper metaphors, proper visual embeddings actually to show these, the layouts these techniques produce to end users. So, for example, some applications are particularly challenging, like text and time-varying data. And of course, nowadays, there is this trend of people doing things using portable devices. So a question arises of how do you handle, both at the interface level and at the algorithmic level, how can you move these solutions to portable devices? And scalability issues, although they are being well handled at the algorithmic level, there is still the problem to handle at the interface level. So there are many challenges in this case. So here are some examples of attempts to treat some of these problems that have already been made. So for example, one of the problems we have when handling too many data is visual clutter. So if you show like your data, for example, papers as points in the screen, if you have like 30,000 scientific papers, as you have there, then you get a very dense cloud, and this is not intuitive, and it's very hard to interact with as far as the user is concerned. So, for example, the hierarchical point placement was introduced as a strategy to help users to interact with these representations when they are very dense. So the idea here is actually to show the visual representation at multiple levels. So a circle in the big circles in the representation actually enclose a group of papers that are similar in the other view. And the idea here is that a user could create or navigate through multiple levels of the visual representation. This is the same idea that has been explored in this other paper, in which actually we embedded the point clouds in 3D space and used blob surfaces to depict the hierarchy and the hierarchical level. So these are possible approaches actually to handle clutter. There are also other strategies, like for example, in this case, Fernando and collaborators, they handled the clutter at the lines. So sometimes these visualizations have line, and they used edge bundles. So to actually show which are the important trends in the connections between data elements. So the goal here is actually to clean the representation to actually convey the essential information and make a better usage of the available space to show the relevant information here. This is another example. In this case, the issue is a collection of, again, scientific papers. And this is the work of Areta Alencar, who is my PhD student. And so her goal was actually to summarize the major events that happened in a collection of papers. In this case, it's the papers produced by one single person. And so a long time, how the topical events, what happened and how the topical events change. So we have actually different maps corresponding to different time instants. And we are trying to convey the important topical events here. So I think this is a good time to hand it over to Rosanne, so she will move on to trying to actually show a bit more ongoing work.
Thank you, Cristina. You go, yeah. I'll try and rush through the last slide so we don't take up more time than we had the slot for. No, I know, but I don't want to use more than we were allowed. But one thing that worries us, and we've been working a little bit on, is the aspect of user perception of this type of mappings. Both in terms of how we code visually, like points on a plane are not very intuitive for many of our users. I mean, I like it. Some of us like it. You can find information there, but they are not very intuitive. But before we do that, we must know what the users actually, how they actually interpret those mappings, so we can know how to code them better. One thing that we have been doing is a little bit of user evaluation on that. To find out what sort of things these types of mapping can actually tell without problem. I mean, without a user doing too much different from another user. So we did develop a user study. I won't be able to give you a lot of details here, but some of the things we were worried about is whether different projections perform better with different tasks, whether performance of projections is task dependent at all, whether performance of projections depend on the data types, like text and imaging data, and whether rotation of the projection is a big issue on interpretation or not, and user preference for projections are governed by what issues. Is segregation capability such a big issue, or there are other issues involved? So we did do an evaluation, and we do have some results. That must be put in context with actual numerical evaluations. And some of the evaluations, numerical evaluations that have to do with finding out whether a projection is good or not come from cluster-based measurements, neighborhood-based measurements, distance-based and community-based measurements associated with tasks. I mean, what sort of tasks can you handle with this type of mapping? And here are some of them. Those two are neighborhood-based. One is class neighborhood-based and the other is distance neighborhood-based. We also use distance plots to see whether distances in the original space are kept in the projected space, like those two over there. And in the middle, it's actual plottings of silhouette measurements, like the projection were a type of mapping, whether you can recognize data by segregation, right? By segregating data that are highly correlated. We also work with interaction techniques, because points on a plane must have the help of additional interaction techniques, such as these, which is topic tree. Is extracted using algorithms for rule-based mining. We extract topics in two ways. One that has been appearing in some of our graphics before, that relates to concurrence of terms. And this is actually based on rule-based techniques that gives you a hierarchy of topics that you can explore and associate with the map. We have also been working on point clouds with semantical ordering of words, so you can more easily know what the topics are in the groups that a projection mapped to certain regions, and at the same time associating the position of the points to the point cloud, so to the tag cloud, to the word cloud. So from a group you can go back to what set of documents are actually associated with those words. And this one is also an association with these type of techniques with medical visualization. And the idea here is to help interact with complex spaces, such as the ones created by fiber tracking on brain scans, brain DTI scans. And interacting directly is very difficult, so if we can manage to reproduce meaningful clusters of techniques on the mapping, we can maybe interact with those to find meaningful sets of fibers in the brain visualization. I'm rushing through here. But the other thing we've been working on is supervised techniques to do dimension reduction. One difficulty is for the user to express what they want. And the other is to use that information in further mapping. So we go back into mining algorithms, and in this particular work, we've worked with PLS, which is a statistical technique that does regression, dimension reduction, classification, you name it. It has been very effective, and it has helped, for instance, to improve the original embedding of data into a space with reduced dimensions that has better features or better qualities in terms of segregation of particular classes. And we do that by sampling the original data and creating a model that can then be used to map larger data